Hello, and welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight with Commissioner Jeffery Mims. And today we're joined by one of my, again, special guests, because all my guests are special. And it's Pastor Adelekan at Tabernacle Baptist Church. And Tokunbo?
Correct.
I
Yes,
got
sir.
it. I got it.
Hit it out
Okay.
the park.
That's the first name. So it's very special to have you here and to talk about yourself, where you came from, and how things actually have matriculated since you've been here in Dayton. And you are from where?
Yes, so Tokunbo Adelekan, my father is Yoruba, Southwest Nigeria.
Okay.
My mother actually is from Columbus.
Okay.
They met at Ohio State University when my dad came over here after the Second War to go to school. And so they met at Ohio State. My father dreams in Yoruba, and my mother dreams in English. So I am sort of doubly hyphenated. I'm
Okay.
African and African American.
Okay.
And so actually I was born when my father was doing his residency in Connecticut. He's an internal surgeon. He's an internal medicine guy. He does nephrology. And my mom's an educator, so I grew up in a house, loved ideas, loved travel, loved geography, loved culture. So
Okay.
yeah, just glad to be in the Gem City with you
Okay.
guys.
Okay.
And,
All right.
and just the awesome things going on in this town, in the community, as well as Tabernacle Baptist Church. Just very fortunate to be here during this era, during this hour of American life. Yeah.
You know, and Tabernacle has been a foundation in the Dayton community for just decades.
Absolutely.
In terms of the leadership that's emulated from that church. And right there on Broadway, right in the heart of the West Side, as some people say.
Absolutely.
So, and I know you have a tremendous membership.
Oh my goodness.
Because a lot of the churches sometimes move around, and some maybe be on the fringes.
Yeah.
And people, even though some of them have moved, they all tend to stay at their church home.
Absolutely.
So that's a great thing. You mentioned Ohio State, but you didn't put the D in front of Ohio State.
Yeah, the Ohio State University. That's right. I should know better.
Yeah.
Being
yeah.
children, being a
So,
child of alumni. Yeah.
No, that's very special.
Yeah.
Some time ago, I was fortunate to be a guest at your church on one of your TV shows, and something that was set up by, again, one of my former students, Mr. Keith Lander.
Yes.
And he's active everywhere.
Absolutely.
You know, in the community and clearly active with the church as well. Every now and then he'll come down to the commission and tell us what we're doing right or what we're doing wrong. And it's always a welcome sight to see him.
Absolutely.
The program that you had at your church that I was fortunate enough to participate in was something that was very much needed, still needed, in terms of how we're dealing with the virus, the COVID-19.
Absolutely.
You know, tell me a little bit about that, because I think that was something that was very special, and I know more and more of our churches are beginning to do something like that.
Yes, well, thank you for the question, and I want to thank you for your participation and your leadership in the city, sort of your moral and political vision. Because the fact of the matter is that we are very fortunate to be a hub for ideas at the church, and the kind of constructive ideas that lead to both liberation and empowerment. When COVID hit, we scrambled as most churches do, but we aligned ourselves with sort of our three cardinal values at the church: prayer, Bible, stewardship. Prayer being the worship of God, Bible being the word of God, stewardship being the work of God. And so what that means is that we sort of draw spiritual knowledge, sort of revelation, in such a way that allows us to engage in relationships, strategic alliances, in order for us to find resources to address the community.
Okay.
In the words of Dr. King, we serve as sort of salt and light in the world. And one of the fruit of that labor was to be able to close the communication gap through navigating cyberspace, and by bringing in critical minds such as yourself to speak to the issues of the day. Dr. King would always say that the church ought to be the headlight of society,
Right.
not the tail light, that the church is the thermostat that regulates the morals of society, and not the thermometer that just takes the temperature of society. And so we take that role very seriously at Tabernacle. And so what we want to do is we want to become a critical mass, a center that brings organic energies to bear upon the needs of the day. And that means critical leadership. And when we mean critical leadership, we mean leadership that thinks critically about the issues, leadership that thinks creatively and does not mind building coalitions and alliances, and then compassionate leadership. And so in terms of that particular show, I believe you were on Tabernacle Talks.
Okay.
And what Tabernacle Talks has allowed us to do is it has allowed us to reach millions of viewers, both regionally, nationally, and internationally, to bring knowledge and insight upon the ills of the day. But more than that, it allows us to find solutions to these issues. And so we want to not just be critics of society by reading the headlines of human beings. We want to be constructive agents of society, subjective, creative agents of society that find solutions to the problems and bring people together. And we believe that once we do that based on prayer, Bible, and stewardship, the Lord will bless the work of our hands. And each day we see new fruit in that endeavor. It's very humbling and very sobering affair, but also very enabling and very exciting affair.
Okay. Yeah, that's very special. Now I'm nervous because I didn't know that the audience was quite that broad.
It's almost as if it just took off sometime around the summer. It just took off, the word got out, and what we like to say is God got behind it, or the flute of the Holy Spirit blew and hit the drums, amen, of history. Okay. And so it's based on the sort of intergenerational ministry. The older people participated in shaping the vision, and the young people ran with the energy. And so it was able to, in many ways, cross the generational and demographic lines of the church and community. Okay. It's a very humbling affair.
You know, I know some churches, when new pastors have come in, they've had a bit of a struggle with merging, if you will, the older generation with the newer generation. Right. And as I've seen in several churches, you know, and yours is one of those. I know Bethel's another church that comes to mind. My church, St. Luke, is another one that comes to mind, where there has been a lot of good work that has been able to pull and keep those factions together. Right. Can you talk about that? Maybe some of the things that you've done that has caused your success in that area?
Well, for me, I think that's a brilliant question and has to be explored from a number of different angles. As someone who does theological ethics and as someone who is sort of like a biblical expositor, I first and foremost, I'm a lover of history. Okay. And so it is important for me to forget not the ancient landmarks and to understand that somebody ran before I did, and to understand that I am sitting, standing, preaching on the shoulders of giants. And so it's very important for me as a biblical preacher as well as a cultural historian, both as a church teacher, well, just as a churchman, as an African American, to study the history, the legends, the legacy, and the light of those that have come before. Okay. And to enter into Tabernacle is to enter into the history and the hope, the beauty and the brilliance of what it means to be black in America. And so I'm a fan of the 6 preachers that came before me, the pastors. Last 2 years ago, we celebrated our 90th anniversary. And what we did was, it was so exciting, we used the cross of Jesus Christ as a sort of template, as a sort of emblem for what we would do. We looked back, amen. First of all, we looked up to God. We looked back to history. We looked around to the community, and then we looked forward. And I found that once you build the trust of those, and you work hard to build the trust of those that have come before, that people don't mind, if you will, working with you to expand the vision for the current moment. So that's very, very important. I think also that I learned from my pastor, Dr. John Ray Youngblood, that if you love your people, that you got to bring them the best. And when you bring the best to your people, you find out that they reinvest as well. And so I am a fan of those that have come before, and but I think most importantly, we do not try to move on anything without getting God's permission and without studying Scripture, because we believe that the Lord has a vision for this time, and the vision for this time is consonant and resonates with what God has done before. And so those are some of the things. And so if there's any success, what I tell people when they say, well, how do you get it done at Tabernacle? And I mean this, and I say, you gotta come and meet the people. You gotta come and meet the people. They have the brilliance, they have the beauty, they have the boldness. That the joy of Tabernacle is to watch the people work. My job may be to coordinate and to put people where they can succeed or where they can produce fruit. But I go to church every Sunday, Wednesday, Zoom calls, looking for how to be blessed. My mind is blown away by what people, we have people who work in politics and do great community development work. We have people who blow your minds in terms of their ability to navigate media. We have a young lady that just all of a sudden, when the vaccine was made available, she just started connecting the churches. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so a lot of times I spend the first 5-10 minutes at church on Sunday doing cheerleading, acknowledging what people have done. According to the theology of the body, I'll say this very quickly. The Bible says we need to honor those. We need to honor that the lesser parts, this is in 1 Corinthians 12, that the more honorable parts of the body are hidden. Brains are hidden. The heart is hidden. And a lot of times people will see people out front, but the real power, the folk that are praying, that are pounding the gates of heaven, are not seen in the church. And so when you read the letters of Paul, for example, in his letter to the church in Corinth, Rome, and Ephesus, at the end of these letters, he's always acknowledging these people, Aquila and Priscilla. Who are these people? Phoebe, Artemis. Who are these people that he's acknowledging? These are people that are behind the scenes, salt and light, building up the ministry and making things much smoother for him. So that's the fluency of grace in the church, and I'm excited to be able to work with such a team of people.
Well, you know, that's actually a foundation for success regardless of the way you are. And when you look at the businesses, you look at families, you have those who are in the background.
Absolutely.
Trying to maintain the foundation,
Absolutely.
trying to keep the leaders, you know, healthy, if you will, for lack of another word, and that's spiritually and emotionally, and also physically. So those things then allow that organization, again, whatever it is, to continue movement in the right direction.
Absolutely.
You know, you've written a book, and I thank you for sharing it with me today. And this is, let me hold this up so that people can see this. It's it's just a title, a charge to keep. It's of course it talks about the remissioning of the urban church for the 21st century. And I know you've talked about some of these kinds of things, and I know growing up in the church, St. Luke Baptist Church, way back in the day when it was on Lakeview and Clifton Drive, and now in this new location for the last, I'm trying to think now, probably 12 years maybe at its new location on Gettysburg. The pastor, Reverend Renard Allen.
Awesome agent of grace.
Okay.
He is a pillar.
Right.
Yes.
So the memories that I have from way back,
Yes.
you know, gosh, with the church being involved in a place for so much.
Absolutely.
You know, it was not just a place where you go for worship, but also being a member of the usher board.
Okay.
Before that, the junior usher board. Before that, I was in the choir, and they put me up there to sing a song with a person who could sing like a lark. In fact, his last name was Lark. The whole family could sing.
Okay.
And it became evident that I couldn't sing. Wow. So then I made a move to be on the usher board.
God has to redistribute the gifts. He can't give everything to one person.
Okay,
yes.
So, but I think about that. In that church, my advisor, the advisor for the usher board, a gentleman by the name of Mr. James Shepard, was also my Little League baseball coach.
Wow.
Over at Hudson Field. And you see these people who were consistently involved in things going on in the community. Later on, there was another gentleman, Mr. Hickman, who was also wound up being school board president. So the churches were always involved in things that were happening in the community.
Absolutely.
Another gentleman, he was at another church, Mr. Diggs, our Boy Scout leader. For a troop 455, I still remember that, and he was a member of the church. Not St. Margaret's, but another church. It'll come to me later on, but he functioned again in the community. He was a person that took his vacation time to take us camping, and we went camping every year during the spring for about a week and a half, and all these people were based in the church.
Absolutely.
And all of them were making community contributions, if you will, that help keep us moving in the right direction. Talk about that perspective, and I guess I'm looking at this book, some of the excerpts in your book that may be referencing or maybe referencing some of the types of things that are critical that may be missing right now as compared to 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago.
Right. So I think it's, again, I love history. And so I think that there's some watershed periods in terms of American history, Black American history and urban history. That must be seen in terms of that sort of three-tiered way. I think there was a major shift that happened sometime between 45 and 73. 45 marking the end of World War II, 73 oil crisis. And I think what you find is you find the Black church now working in what some people may call a post-soul, a post-integration, or a post-civil rights moment. And what happened in that moment is that the major forces that led to the growth and the flourishing of African-American churches, urban churches, prior to World War II and a little bit after that, no longer exist. And so those cultural trends, those demographic trends need to be analyzed, identified. Couple of things, I think. Most churches in the Northeast and the Midwest, they grew on what I call the 3 M's. That is to say, on the minister, on migration, and on music. Minister, migration, and music. So huge churches were built, if you will, right after Second World War, or there are 2 ways, right after Civil War and then right after the First World War, in terms of African Americans leaving the South looking for greener pastures. And so churches from Virginia all the way up to Boston began to grow. And then coming to this side of the world through Kentucky, if you will, Dayton, Columbus, Detroit, Chicago, Indiana, churches began to grow that way. What happened, I believe, after 73 is that you have, if you will, the reconstitution of the industrial base. Jobs are thinning out, if you will. Service industries are growing. You have the swelling of mass incarceration. And then you have the hollowing of the inner city, with now you have vanilla suburbs and chocolate cities. So that critical intellectual organic mass that held sway for the Black church and the Black college for those 60, 70 years now has to be revised. Now people are moving out. Younger people will go away to college, and they tend not to return. So many people may go to Morehouse, or they may go to Spelman, they may go to Tuskegee, but they do not return to these former cities because they're looking, if you will, for new jobs. One of the great things that you're doing, just as a human being, not as a politician, is finding ways to reconstitute the city along economic lines, job lines, and education lines. That is critical for migration. That is critical for the reconstitution of the community. And so once we can begin to work on the jobs, that's why it's important that the church no longer stay indoors, that the church begin to work as salt and light in the world, so that we can remission the church and say, okay, what are the things that we need to look at, internal to the church and external to the church? I've identified some of the external things. Jobs. We have to identify jobs. We have to find people good schools, that kind of thing, homes. But internally, we need to address things that used to be taboo. Issues of depression, insomnia, self-hate. So when the church is no longer seen as addressing those issues, people tend to get nervous about attendance. And so one of the things we have to do is do a double-edged move. We got to look at how do we restore the community, and how do we reconstitute certain mechanisms in the church so they remain relevant across generational lines. And that's the fun part of working with history and the present. And the great thing about COVID is it has encouraged many people, if not compelled people, to say maybe technology is not so bad after all. 2 other things I would mention. One of my colleagues, Willett Burgee, argues that Facebook is now the drum, the African drum, the way to communicate, right? Over and against the forces or structures that will seek to marginalize you. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to come up with alternative communication systems that suit our community. How did Jay-Z put it? Yes, I know that I'm hustling, but I have to do what I know before I can do what I know. In other words, I have to know what my community in order for me to expand outside. Right. And so those are some critical things. I think that the last thing is this, and you find this a lot with the Black Lives Matter movement, that the music has to be affirmed. My generation, and I'll say this humbly, my generation was the first generation in the history of African Americans coming out of slavery in which the generation before rejected the cultural and aesthetic forms of the generation coming. So the musical gap in our communities is also key to reconstitution of church and community. One of the things I tell my young people with the Black Lives Matter movement is keep the march, keep your analysis. You guys are great, you guys are builders, but don't forget the music, because the music is the invisible force that makes the difference between you and your self-implosion, your self-destruction. Music is the song that gave us courage and compassion and creativity over and against those forces that sought to what? To delimit and if you will, circumscribe black life and black beauty. So once we can close that gap, then we can see new things happening, great things happening. And I'm glad I'm part of that conversation.
Yeah, and that's still good, because it's again, being a musician myself and understanding how it gives you another vision to the world.
That's right. It gives alternative moral vision, absolutely.
You can travel. It helps you with your understanding of the reading skills. It helps you with your understanding of the math skills, your quarter notes, your half notes, your fractions. All those things are combined together. Now, I'm thinking we're getting close to time, which is unfortunate. And I know, we have about 2 minutes left? Okay. We got 5. Good. Okay. So the churches and pastors who have been heavily involved with trying to ensure that more and more of the African Americans are being being tested, and also having the opportunity to get their vaccination.
Absolutely.
I know I received my second shot, just a few days ago.
Amen.
And I'm blessed as a result of that. The feelings I've had relative to this is certainly being cautious, not from just a personal perspective, but also as a leader in the community, to try to push that more people are safe.
Absolutely.
In terms of, again, at their appropriate distances, wearing their mask, and doing everything they can in terms of their hygiene, washing their hands every time they have the opportunity to do so. It's helped us nationwide, especially now that we have a person who is leading us who has taken this whole situation a whole lot more seriously than it has been in the past. And we're all blessed because we're having fewer deaths.
Absolutely.
And we're having fewer incidents of individuals who are contacting the disease. What has been some of your roles in the community in terms of working with other churches to try to help accelerate those situations for the African American citizens that we have in the Dayton area, because they have been the most affected?
Absolutely. So for me, I will be unapologetic about my biases. I mentioned earlier that my father is a medical doctor. So is my wife. She works at Children's Hospital. So for me, the vaccine is crucial, and I want to make it available to as many people as possible. However, because I'm a pastor, I first have to seek the peace of the city, as well as the unity of the congregation. And what I simply mean by that is that it is important for me to track the reasons why there's some resistance, if you will, towards taking the vaccine in the community. And that means I need to educate myself. And what I found is there are 3 crucial barriers in regards to African Americans and working class people, urban citizens, in regards to this issue that must be taken seriously by moral leaders. I think first that one has to track, inspect, and analyze the history of African Americans vis-a-vis the federal government, and that has been a topsy-turvy one. So that there's a level of hermeneutics of suspicion, of distrust in regards to how the government has treated us. Even though many African Americans have served as great agents for the government, the federal government has had a very topsy-turvy relationship with us, and so that's important. I think the second thing is specific to healthcare.
And you put that very nicely. I appreciate that.
Yes. So we have to pray about these things, and we have to work through discernment. I think the second thing is the history of African Americans with the healthcare sector, not just in regards to the Tuskegee experiment, but even now in terms of access to quality healthcare, the ways in which women are treated, the ways in which the ethics of the emergency room, that there's some uninterrogated bias that black folk, if you will, Commissioner Mims, have more tolerance for pain, and so therefore don't need to be treated certain ways. So that needs to be navigated. And I think the third element is whether or not the vaccine is being used by big businesses to widen the wealth gap in America. And so the first thing I have to do is respect those viewpoints and understand there's a plurality of viewpoints out there in regards to the vaccine with our community. That moves me now to take this position, and I call it AID, A-I-D. First is the affirmation and acknowledgement of the plurality of viewpoints. I have to listen to my brothers and sisters across the board. Some of them are in my church that don't want to take the vaccine because of the reasons that I enumerated.
Right.
The second thing is insight and information. How do we begin to talk and educate ourselves about the vaccine? Whether that means we need to use Commissioner Mims as a model or the Vice President as a model, and talk about how the test rates across the world and how those things have been successful, but still listen to people's reservation. And then finally, lead people to discernment and decision around it, you see. So for me, I call myself a poster child for it, but it is important that I do not try to coerce anyone, that we listen, AID, affirmation and acknowledgement, insight and information, discernment and decision, so that people can make the decision around it in terms of their comfort level. And that's how I seek the peace of the city and the fluency of leadership. And I think that works very well for us.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And that's obviously a very good note for us to end on as we talk about that and the importance of everyone making sure that they do everything they can to get their vaccination. Gosh, I can't think of anything else to say. I mean, you've done a tremendous job.
You're awesome. You're such a refreshing, soulful spirit.
Well, man, it's refreshing to be here with you, because you make my heart smile, as they say.
Very humble.
So again, this is brought us to the end of another edition of In the Spotlight with Commissioner Jeffery Mims. Again, with my guest, Pastor Adelekan at the Tabernacle Baptist Church here in Dayton on Broadway Avenue. We can be seen on the Dayton channel, www.daytonohio.gov, or very shortly it would be on the YouTube version of Dayton Public's channel. So thank you again for your time, and thank you everyone for those who are watching, and have a great day.